Hello.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it's fine now, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, I cannot connect my headphone with laptop. I don't know, like Bluetooth connection is failing. That's why it took some time. Sorry for that.
It's all right. Welcome to Research Forum, which is conducting by Department of English, Calicut University. So, good afternoon, all. Good afternoon, everyone. And after a short break, we are restarting our program. Today, we are listening to Dr. Muhammadali PK's talk in his paper Capital and Hegemony, Male Axis of Mappila Muslim Masculinities. This article explores how different forms of capital act in configuring power relations among differently positioned Mappila Muslim men. Dr. Muhammad Ali PK was awarded his PhD from IIT Madras, who was a Fulbright Nehru Doctoral Fellow at the Center for Study of Men and Masculinities, the State University of New York at Stony Brook, USA. Currently, he is the assistant professor at PG and Research Department of English, TKM College of Arts and Science, Kollam. So, friends, we will listen to Muhammad Ali. Over to you, Muhammad Ali. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I hope my slides are visible, right?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. Okay, 1 second. All right. First of all, I would like to thank the research for University of Calicut for having me here, and I should also start with apologizing to Nazreen for making it so late, as she has been in contact with me for I think more than about 6 months at least. So anyway, finally we made it. So presenting this after 3 hours of class. So that is there, but still anyway, we are move on with today's session. So today's session is titled as Men, Capital and Hegemony. Male axis of Mappila Muslim masculinities. And this is actually part of my thesis, and as Nazreen has already explained, there's been published in the Journal of Men's Studies. So my thesis was actually, sort of trying to attempt to map Mappila Muslim men at the intersections of religion, masculinity, and ethnicity, of which this chapter is one of the important chapters of the thesis. So I thought it would be great to present this one today for today's session. So moving on, let me start with the objectives of this particular chapter. According to Shaheen Jarami, one of the famous US sociologists who explored gender in the context of Muslims, made it clear that when we analyze gender, especially in the context of minorities or marginalized sections, we have to take into account both indigenous productions as well as external stereotyping. So in marginalized cultures, gender has a double life of both indigenous productions as well as external stereotyping. And in my thesis, especially the first chapter of my thesis, actually explored the stereotyping, especially in the context of the global geopolitics. We have where we have this binary of bad Muslim, good Muslim binary, which is actually a gendered one according to Sanina Mehra. And there are scholars who actually explore this, how this binary of good Muslim and bad Muslim is highly gendered. And especially when we look at the Indian context, we have all these debates right-wing narrative about Muslim men, especially, as well as their depiction in the narrative public domain of our public sphere. And the second part, that is indigenous production. This is what I'm going to look at in this particular paper, where I am actually looking at the way in which the masculinities are shaped in the real life situations through like since my work was an interdisciplinary work. I made use of like different data to explore, this question. So here I make use of, ethnographic data in order to explore the indigenous productions. And according to Mimi Shivers, yet another scholar of sociology of gender, who says that we observes that when we analyze gender, especially masculinities, we have to take into account both male female axis uh, and the male male axis, right? So here in this one, I look at the scope of this paper is narrowed down to the male male axis of Mappila Muslim masculine. I'm not actually looking at the question of male female axis, because like rest of my chapters are doing, like specifically looking at that particular question. So particularly speaking about this chapter is actually, an exploration of how different forms of capital uh, you know, shape masculinities among Mappila Muslims, or the gender relations among differently positioned Mappila men. This is what actually I'm going to do in this particular, paper presentation. So the field of this study is Mahalu system as well as religious organizations. As we all know, Mahalu is an important, locally structured locally institutionalized public domain of a Muslim public domain, right, at local level of Mappila Muslims, which is very important, especially in terms of, if you look at it, the role of mahallus in terms of the faith community formation. Like we have madrasas, mosque, and for religious education, religious training, and almost every ceremonies and matters that's related to our daily life. Nowadays, we can also find that the mahallus increasingly involve negotiations, and like when there are problems within a family or between individuals or between families in a particular mahallu, and charity activities ensuring the community empowerment as well as educational activities, all these, right? So then actually I would like to tell you that like mahallus has a significant role in shaping both material as well as philosophical, world, life of, Mahalu inhabitants, right? And then religious organizers. We have different religious organizations. So even almost all Muslims of Kerala are called Sunnis. Like when we call that particular term Sunni, which actually refers to the organized form of traditionalist Muslims who stand against the organized reformists in Kerala. Now, even though this category is problematic, to enter into the debate, we can maybe categorize like reformist organizations as well as traditionalist organizations, and like there are sort of you know sectarian divisions within uh, sects and all that. And in order to collect data, I've chosen particular place called Valiagram, which is actually like pseudonymously, said, so which is a region in the northern part of Calicut. And the informants that I interacted with include, people from different background, different age groups, different social status, all that, and different educational backgrounds. And some of the methods that I've used to, collect data include participant observation, semi-structured interviews, and case studies. I hope I'm visible. I mean, I'm audible to,
Yes,
right?
yes, you are audible.
Fine.
Yes.
So now let's look at the theoretical framework of this particular study. So we have to first look at, the idea of how can we go about the idea of masculinity? How can we define it, right? It's like if we look at the gender, like there has been a trajectory which shows like different approaches to the question of gender, where we have a, you know, sex role approach, where we somehow uh, uh, use gender categories as synonymous with sexed bodies, and that's how it works, right? So with gender, with Butler, she radically reconceptualized the idea of gender, where gender is more of a performance, right? Gender is like what we do. Gender is the act. It's the verb, right? It's not the noun or being. So, like what you do actually is gender. So, what we consider as the result of gender is actually when it has got a dialogic, mutually constitutive relations where the expressions of gender, we generally consider the expressions of gender are the discourse which produce gender, right? So, drawing from Butler, Kollam, an Australian sociologist, defines masculinity simultaneously as masculinity as a central feature of gender relation, as a place in gender relation, practices through which men and women engage that place in gender, the effects of these practices on bodily experience, personality, and culture. So it's a comprehensive definition of masculinity. So like a place as well as the activities and the effects of these practices. These are roughly, to define masculinities. These are the major elements that R.W. Cornell looks at, right? But when we say the practices or the acts or the position, which are the hegemonic position in a particular social setup, right? When we look at from the perspective of gender. And the problem that we have, especially when we have this power center, that masculinity is actually gender, or which produce a very gendered society, right? Through recurring enactment, which masculine practices structure the production and distribution of resources, the distribution of power in the form of authority. Ethics is the social arena of desire and sexuality, and symbolism, or the production of meaning and values. Okay, so masculinity is actually influence all these. So it has got like an overarching, widespread influence upon the way in which people live. So now, how can we go about exploring these relations, which is mostly hegemonic, right? Where women are, which is detrimental to women, and women are at the receiving end, which is patriarchal mostly. So how can we go about it? How will we enter into an analysis of the power hegemony or relations that we have in our society? So gender or masculinity is not only, it's not just dominate over women, or we also have, intra and among men, like there are also like power relations. As I already told you, focus of this particular study is the male axis. I'm actually looking at how differently positioned, how masculinities shape the relations among differently positioned men. So, hegemonic masculinity, which is a theoretical framework proposed by Cornell, where we have a 40-year models of masculinities. With the top of the run is hegemonic model, which is the idealized model of masculinity, which insists all other masculinities to, uh, 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 as a yardstick, like all other masculinities have to analyze their masculine, position based on the hegemonic or the idealized model that we have. If it case in the Western context, maybe we have the white, employed, married, successful man who illustrate, it's an example for hegemonic model. If we come to the Indian case, which is the Savarna or upper caste, maybe like the privileged man from the upper strata of the society. Then moving on, we have composite masculinity, which is the second in the order, which is even though like which is a patriarchal dividend, since it benefits all the privileges of this structure, power structure, we do not actively, take part in the hegemonic, maybe process. Instead, it's a passive sustainer, but still, it's at the, it has, complicit masculinity has all the privileges of hegemonic masculinity. Thirdly, we have subordinate masculinity, which is inferior other. For example, if we look at gay men, or maybe handicapped, differently abled men, can be considered as examples for subordinate masculinities. And finally, we have marginalized masculinities with little access to the hegemonic model, precisely because of the marginalized social occasions of those men. In the racial context, we have the black men who can never access, the hegemonic model, precisely because of their social occasion. In the case of Dalit masculinity, right, in Indian context, in a particular hegemonic setup, they do not have access to the hegemonic model. Right? So this is a four-tier model, even though it's a restricted, limited, fixed category. There are like a lot of criticism against this particular model, which helps us to actually enter into the debate to analyze, the power relations among differently positioned men. So now we'll look at the analytic framework of this particular study, which is based on Pierre Bourdieu's theory of practice, where we have the ideas of social field and capital. Social field is an autonomous space where different actors, different individuals, or different groups compete or struggle for different resources available in the social field. And whereas capital are the different forms of resources for which these individual or the groups are competing. So we have like different fields. In some fields, some particular, form of capital are valued, whereas in the other, some other forms of capital. So it depends upon the field, like which forms of capital is highly valued, or like, for example, if you take, in the case of an educational institution who is like, teaching ability may be a form of capital that sort of enables someone to be in a better position, right? So in different contexts, different forms of capital matters. And for forms of capital that Pierre Bourdieu categorizes are the economic capital, which is material, quantifiable, and measurable. Our job, or the money we have, or the land, or the estate, or the property, all that comes under this category. Whereas in the secondly, we have cultural capital, which is the competitive advantage through privileged knowledge and legitimate behavior. So when we look at the question of merit and all that comes, I think, under this particular category called cultural capital, which is actually competitive advantage, right? Like your class, your caste, and your gender, everything matters, especially when we analyze subject positions or individuals based on this. Then we also have social capital, which is the prestige and influence through a durable network and institutionalized relationship. So which is again could be a caste or status groups, all that comes under this category. Then we have symbolic capital, which is a recognition and legitimacy for the possession of one or more other forms of capital. So these are the four forms of capital. So this is kind of an analytical framework that I'm employing, right, to explore the power relations among differently positioned men among Mappila Muslims. So now this is the analytic category. So since ulama masculinity and umara masculinity, these are like two of the predominant, categories of masculinities especially among Mappila Muslims. I consider these two as analytic categories. Then we also have non-hegemonic, masculinity, right? The men, the masculine embodiment from the non-hegemonic background. So, what is like ulama, or like what makes ulama masculinity an authorized one? So, ulama, technically speaking, which is actually a religious authority as far as Islam is concerned, right? A prophet Muhammad is reported to have said that ulamas, or the scholars, are the heirs of prophets, and this is how like the authorization of ulama actually uh, uh, take place. And technically speaking, they are the guardians, transmitters, and interpreters of Islamic knowledge, Islamic doctrines, and Islamic law. And they are by tradition, by long-standing tradition, ulama are, which is actually a plural of which singular is alim and female is alima. So they are educated in religious institutions and trained in Quran, which is words of God, and Hadith, which is prophetic saying or prophetic deeds, Qiyas, that's analogical learning, and Ijma, that is judicial consensus. So these are the four, disciplines in which like scholars are well versed with. Then the form of capital that they embody, that they possess, are ilm, or knowledge, Islamic knowledge, right? This is what makes the authorization of ulama, the possession or the accumulation of this particular form of capital called ilm, or knowledge of Quran, Hadith, Qiyas, and Ijma. And this particular form of capital is highly valued in religious institutions and organizations. For example, like if you look at the imams of a mosque, or like so the teachers of a madrasa, or religious leaders of religious organizations. I mean, this particular form of capital is highly valued, and which actually enables their ascendancy to a sort of authorization, or to a comparatively hegemonic position. And the second one,
Sir, excuse me, sir.
yeah,
So I think your slides are not, yeah,
moving.
share. Yeah, it's working now. Your slide seems not working. It is fine now.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, I think it is right.
All right,
Yeah,
fine.
we can see it
So now
now.
Okay,
look
sir.
at the second category, the second predominant category of Mappila Muslim as well, which is actually Umara masculinity, of uh, which is actually leaders of the community. So, like there are particular sayings, like particular, you know, uh, uh, words, technical terms, maybe locally used, like Nattukaranava, or all that, which refers to ulama masculinity, who are the leaders. Earlier, it was used to refer to the governors as well as rulers of if you look at it, you'll find that which is a modern equivalent of the English word prince, are called emir, right? Emir, which actually stands for now prince, even though actually the meaning, the word actually means command, or the leader, and which is, again, this is a plural term, umara, of which the singular is amir, and the feminine version is amira. And in the context of Mappila Muslims, in the Kerala local context, Umara actually refers to the term Umara actually refers to socio-political leaders, not the religious scholars. Here it's socio-political leaders. Maybe they are part of political organizations, or other, social organizations, institutions, and all that. And generally speaking, the highly valued form of capital uh, which authorize Umara masculinity is their birth, or the possession of family status, of Tarawa, or high status family. This is what actually like the form of capital, the umara, generally speaking, poses, which authorize them, especially in the power relations among differently positioned men. And if you look at, for example, the president position of Indian Union Muslim League, this is for years, right? Has been reserved for a particular family. Like if you look at, president positions of different mahallus, which is somehow you will find, even though you will find exceptions, generally speaking, which is actually reserved to the people who come under this particular category called Umara masculinity, or like from high status family. And if you look at like some of the studies about this, like even Herman Gunther, he explains about the German lexicographer, talks about the idea of Tarawad, of a family or house of noble men owning a lot of land. That's how he defines it. So this is how it works. And now this is what like an important observation that I make in my study, that uh, ulama masculinity and social mobility, because ulama, or if you look at the organizations in Mahallus, especially the Mahallu that I am actually dealing with here, or any other Mahallus in Kerala, you will find all these religious organizations or activists of these religious organizations are involved in educational activities, right? So it empowers the community, right? So they send young people from their respective mahallus to different institutions that include the institutions run by this respective organization. So we have a number of organizations run by Sunni organizations as well as Jamaat Mujahid organizations, right? And in this, for the purpose of this study, I have analyzed four case studies, of which I have chosen like four scholars, imams of local mosques. They are Hassan Faizi, Abdul Salam Sakafi, Abdullah Maulavi, and Samad Maulavi. They are the imams of local, mosque in that particular place called Valyagrama. So, what is important about Valyagrama is that where we have the presence of all religious organizations, Sunni groups as well as Jamaat, Mujahid, even Tabligh, and we have four mosques run by run by these four organizations. Also, we have two madrasas in that particular place. One is run by one of Sunni groups, that's AP, and then one is Jamaat, and especially the people from Sunni backgrounds and their kids to Sunni madrasas, whereas people from Mujahid and Jamaat backgrounds and their kids to Jamaat madrasas. So these are the imams of the mosques run by these organizations. So uh, if you look at their social status, Abdul Salam Sakafi is actually like from a family of Muslims, I mean Sakafis or Muslims, like from the family lineage of ulamas, whereas Hassan Faizi is from like a financially struggling family background, but both of them, and if you look at the case of Abdullah Maulavi and Samad Maulavi as well, they are also like from financially backward family backgrounds. But irrespective of all that, all these people are high because they are the imams of the mosque, like highly respected in the local, setup. They are called for the inauguration of like when they are opening of new shops or whatever, or like they are always there on stage when there are marriages and so on and so forth, right? So, comparatively, you will find the kind of authorization that takes place if you look at these people. And what makes them, authorized or reverend respectably that particular locality is their accumulation of the capital called il, or Islamic knowledge, which also made them the leaders of different religious organizations. However, if you look at this is actually a very linear narrative, right? Like, you possess, accumulate this particular form of capital so that your social position is, uh, um, that has got an ascendancy, all that. But this is like, apart from this linear narrative, it has also got a complicated, complex picture, especially when you look at Cherushiri, he's a leader of EK Sunni groups, and like he's hailed for his simplicity. While Kantapuram, APA Bhavakarmasala is sort of disparaged for extravagance, right? Like people criticize him for like his luxurious, uh, quote unquote maybe, lifestyle. So the counter from the supporters, sympathizers of Kantapuram is that it is not like these luxuries or the amenities, and all these are not reserved for Pramanis. Ulama can also use it if situation demands. Like given the amount of work they are doing, like they need, these amenities and all that. So anyway, like what we find from this observation is that on one hand, like ulama masculine, or the form of ilm or the Islamic knowledge as a form of capital enables or empowers men from non-hegemonic background. All right, but when we actually like when they encounter with the capital of family status, what happens is that like you find a kind of a hand to the family status capital. So if you look at the Umara, the next session of this slide, you find where we find Umara masculinity and social hegemony. Word, I specifically observe that nowadays, like you find an unprecedented currency of the term Umara, especially you will find different organizations conduct Umara conferences in order to mobilize the people. Like there is an emergence of Gulf masculinity among Mappila Muslims, right? Those who accumulate wealth after migrating to the Gulf, and like those who sort of new elites among Mappila Muslims. So in order to mobilize them, you find like different organizations conduct Umara conferences or Umara Sangamangal and so on. So like basically, Umaraks are the patriarchs. They are locally called Natu Karano, and they are always on stage. Like you'll find like they are the presidents of Mahallus. They are always on stage when there are like Mahallu events. There are marriages, and you will find presence of there as part of all the social, in the social political realm of Muslim public sphere, especially at the local level and in the larger level as well. And the status of Umara is ascribed by birth through Tharavadu. As I already told you, Hermann Gunder, the German lexicographer, defines Tharavadu as like the of noble, family lineage of noble men with, lots of land, like that. And here, unlike ulama, access to Umara masculinity is restricted only to the people who are from Tharavadu background. So in the case of ulama, anyone, right, irrespective of their background, especially people from non-hegemonic background, right? So if they accumulate the form of capital, that is Islamic knowledge, which is valued in that particular social field, which enables, which empowers, which sort of ascends, authorize them in the social relations, whereas Umara status is restricted to the people who belong to a particular family status. Okay. So in the case of Valia Gramam, which is actually pseudonymously called so, the president as well as mosque committee president, madrasa committee president, irrespective of organizational backgrounds, are all restricted to the people who belong to high status families. This is the major observation that I make in this in this study. So moving on, we also, if we look at the marriage practices among Mappila Muslim masculinities, we find similar tendencies again. in the 20th century, we find, especially in the towards the end of the 20th century, at least we find a considerable change, especially in the marriage, family culture or marriage, conjugal relations in the West Asian or the large Asian context. But still, selecting marriage partners is something that has a lot to do with the family status, which are in fact reflexive of the hegemonic social relations that we have in an institutionalized form. So in the case of Mappilas, we have like sub-communities, subgroups called Tangals, Mappilas, Susans, and Pusalans. They are all endogamous groups. Even though like sometimes we call the entire Muslim community in Malabar as Mappilas, like we go a little deeper, like we have these different communities, and they are, I hope everybody knows it, right? Are endogamous groups, and this is a like very predominant usage among Mappila Muslims. This is kufu vokal, which is actually matching between the bride and bridegroom in arranged marriage. So usually what happens is that the last thing to be compromised upon is the family lineage. So like I've analyzed some cases from my field. And even if there are, marriages between, among, cutting across these sub-community boundaries, which are generally hypergamous marriages. All right. So what the men from relatively higher end of the society marries women from the lower, and that's how it works. Even if there are marriages across, these sub-community identities. And however, nowadays what happens is that these tendencies, these authorization of family status began to be complicated, especially in the context of the larger, upward social mobility of the community in terms of education, migration, and entrepreneurship, so on and so forth. So people like Kosala observes, things like Gulf masculinity. Well, nowadays, Malabar is actually known for the migration to the Gulf, right? Large-scale migration to the Gulf as a workforce to the Persian Gulf, right? So, like we have nowadays, which actually changes the way in which the power relations. The power status quo among Mappila Muslims, right? So nowadays, like we find the emergence of new elite men with novel socio-religious aesthetics as an effort to produce a Muslim, which is also like observed by people like Osala, produce a Muslim modernity involving in reformist, educational, charity activities. So people from non-hegemonic background, they emerge as new elites of Mappila Muslim, and which actually sort of disrupt, complicate the power status quo that we have among Mappila Muslims. And these new elites are increasingly recognized as community leaders. That is the context of the Umrah conference. Is like the unprecedented currency that I told you that I talked about, right? Unprecedented currency of Umrah conferences that we have among Mappila Muslims. So the response from Taravadu high status families include, you will find nowadays that I'm not sort of renouncing it, but still if you analyze Taravadu conferences, nowadays you find a number of Taravadu conferences everywhere in Malabar, which actually sort of impart a Taravad pride and which also felicitate new achievers, right? On one hand, they imparted Taravadu pride. On the other, they also felicitate new achievers. So, new achievers in the sense these are the modern standards which are valued, especially in the changed context, right? Education, profession, entrepreneurship. These are the new parameters of status, and which actually nowadays began to authorize people, and that began to sort of complicate the power status quo among Mappila Muslims. So these are the things that is being done, especially in Tarwadu conferences. That is, on one hand, they are imparting Tarwadu pride. On the other hand, they sort of felicitate new achievers, and also they motivate, inspire the people, the young people from their family lineage to sort of accumulate new forms of capital which are valued in the change or the modern times, like education, profession, entrepreneurship, so on and so forth. So this is the last slide of my presentation, conclusion. So this is what I did in this paper, that I explored male axis of power relations among Mappila Muslims, and of which I considered ulama and umara masculinities, since these are the two hegemonic models, as analytic categories, and hegemony of ulama masculinity in the field of Muslim religious institution and organizations, where religious knowledge is highly valued. Okay, whereas hegemony of Umara masculinity in the field of local level public domain of malus, where family status is valued. This is what, like, the general picture, whereas the position of ulama masculinity is open, that enables men from non-hegemonic background to, ascend into, a comparatively hegemonic position. Whereas Umara masculinity is restricted to people who belong to, high status families. When these positions confront each other, we find Umara masculinity is hegemonic over ulama masculinity. However, this linear narrative again is complicated, especially in the context of the emergence of new elite men among Mappila Muslims. And what I try to look at is like how modernity, or like, the capitals which are valued in the modern context, influence or change, insinuate the way in which Mappila Muslim masculinities are embodied or shaped, as well as the power relations among Mappila Muslim men. That's it. Thank you. Thank you for listening. So, yeah.
Thank you, Qasim. Muhammadali. So the session is open for discussion, questions, suggestions, or any critical comments. So please.
So, if there are comments or additions, deletions, questions, queries, എന്തെങ്കിലും ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ നമുക്ക് അതും കൂടെ ചെയ്തിട്ട് അവസാനിപ്പിക്കാം. I'm a little tired today. I'm attending this after 3 classes. That's why.
Hello, Dr. Muhammadali. I'm Janaki. Okay. I don't want to tax you too much, but at the same time, your whole premise actually triggered a certain doubt within me. So that's why I just wanted to clarify that. Because I think in the beginning, if I got you right, you were saying something about how you're trying to understand masculinity, not as a male female kind of an axis, but male axis, right? Am I right? I'm because
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah. I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. So you was trying to look at the construction of hegemonic masculinity in terms of the relationship between the Umara Muslims and ulama masculinity, right? Umra masculinity. Yeah. So what I want, and as you correctly pointed out, usually the gender identities earlier used to be understood or encountered in terms of this man-woman binary. That was the way it was earlier, the kind of relational identities. But then we had a shift. But to understand masculinity in all its complexities, you had to look at these kinds of relationships as well. But in your presentation, I don't think because occasionally it was getting interrupted, so I don't know whether I missed out on something very vital. But what I realized that you were not alluding to, or you were not trying to, factor in the construction of Muslim or femininity within the Muslim households in order to understand this masculinity, the hegemonic masculinity. Do you think it is possible to completely, exclude that aspect when trying to understand the construction of hegemonic masculinity?
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Actually, this is actually a part of my thesis. This particular chapter that I have published in actually the Journal of Men's Studies, which focuses on this particular aspect. That's male axis. However, my thesis, my research project explored male axis as well as male female axis and external stereotyping of Mappila Muslims and how religion, religious piety insinuate, masculinities, all that aspect. But for this particular presentation, I have chosen this. That's it. Like, doesn't mean that the work that I've done did not look at the question of male-female axis. That was also like part of my thesis, and I was actually sort of trying to look at the trajectory of the transformation of gender relations that we have among Mappila, especially in the modern. If you look at the modern context, like there is like very, even I don't know like whether I can call it drastic, but still there is a significant change that we can find in the relations. But that is also that was also part of my research project. However, like for the purpose of this particular presentation, I have chosen this particular aspect of male axis. I hope I made it clear.
Yeah, thank you, Muhammadali. I think I more or less got it, when you said that you are actually presenting a part of your larger thesis. But even when it is so, I'm just still wondering, even if the feminine presence is not so direct, and very obvious, but അദൃശ്യമായിട്ട് അത് അവിടെ ഇല്ലേ? Even male axis ആൺ ബന്ധങ്ങളും in terms of പുരുഷന്മാർ തമ്മിലുള്ള ഒരു ബന്ധങ്ങളിലൂടെ ഉരുത്തിരിയുന്ന ആണത്തമാണെങ്കിൽ പോലും അതിലും ഒരു അദൃശ്യമായ ഒരു സ്ത്രീയുടെ സാന്നിധ്യം എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ബയോളജിക്കൽ ആൻഡ് ഫിസിക്കൽ ആയിട്ടല്ല ഞാൻ പറയുന്നത്, ബട്ട് ഫെമിനിൻ ആസ് എ കാറ്റഗറി. അപ്പോൾ ആ ഒരു ജെൻഡർ കാറ്റഗറിയുടെ ഒരു പ്രസൻസ്, ഒരു ഷാഡോ അവിടെ ഉണ്ടാവില്ലേ എന്ന് ഞാൻ ചോദിച്ചതാണ്.
Yeah, obviously, that's what the whole point is. So, like when especially as, in the context of Cornell's defining of, then obviously, like we have masculine is a practice. Like when we say it's a practice, it is understood that femininity is also a practice. It doesn't have anything to do with the sex body. That's how we understand, especially in the performance wave of gender, right? So obviously, that's the whole point is, Thank you for clarifying.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
You found it confusing,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because I know it was it's not so easy to ask questions based on this kind of a presentation so fast, but something that struck me, and that's why I just wanted to clear. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Muhammadali, I'm Sharif, one of the faculty department. So I was also wondering about.
Excuse me, is it Sharif, sir?
Yeah.
Right. I know you,
Okay.
We don't met, but I know you,
I was also wondering whether this formula always works. Like, for example, the link between the ulama and the laymen in the community. See, for instance, if you take the Catholic-Protestant dichotomy, so among Protestants, the priesthood is never as strong as it is among Catholics. It's always a set of older men who are in power. Okay, there are pastors, of course, in the church, but generally it is the civilian council which holds power. Okay, and the knowledge part is generally underplayed. Okay, the very ethics of Protestantism says that the Bible is an open document. So I was wondering whether something similar is happening in the Kerala landscape, for example. So even among Sunnis, the power is basically with a group of aldermen in the community, of which the Ustad may be one. So this kind of an axis is probably developing. I don't know. From what I've observed, I never went to a madrasa, for example. I had a home tuition at home, and then it stopped altogether. But from what I know, from the uh, background, I think this is what works. You know, power is not strictly in the hands of the priests. Okay, ilm is all right, knowledge, yeah, it gives you power. But whether this is very markedly felt, even today, apart from certain well-known religious so-called leaders, Kantapuram, for example, or the various other people, they are there in the other factions also, among Mujahids and Jamaat factions, they're also there. But as far as power is concerned, real power actually rests in the hands of these who are called Pramanima in ordinary parlance, Samudaya Pramanima. They are present even in Bashir's novel, if you have noticed that. Samudaya സമുദായത്തിലെ പ്രമാണിമാരാണ്. Take Kunjupathuma's father, for example, Vattanadima. He has certain pretensions about religious knowledge. He's not a priest. He's not an ustad. Okay, but he in those days, that was probably in the 1940s, he didn't allow young men to grow their hair. Okay, immediately he would take them to a barber and have their heads shaved. So this kind of exercise of authority, I think, is widespread. Okay, not as much as I mean, as you find in certain areas, but generally. So this is what I wondered.
I think what's said is precisely the concise summary of my paper, it seems. So this is exactly what I have sort of elaborated in the paper. Whether I'm not sure, like whether I made it confusing or not, but this is exactly what that I have argued throughout the paper. I mean, like we have, these are the two predominant categories of masculinities we have, especially if you want to enter into analyzing, the power structure in terms of masculinity. Like these are like some of the two categories we have, and when they confront each other, obviously it's always, the Brahmanis or this Umara masculinity. That's what I said, the Umara,
And I got
So,
that. I got that. So my problem was whether the first category, in fact, exists at all in real terms. That's what I wanted. Yeah, I got your point.
okay,
I
okay.
got your counterpoising.
It doesn't exist at all. That's what you.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, all right. I mean, especially, I think nowadays, even though like earlier we have like different. If you look at the trajectory of, the social status of the ulama as a class, especially among Muslims, nowadays I think their power status has been changing. Especially, I think like with Kantapuram, AP Abubakar Muslim and all, like sort of, along with the Islamic knowledge capital, they're also sort of trying to incorporate forms of capital, like, which is valued in the modern times, especially technology or modern gadgets, as well as modern knowledge. And nowadays, if you look at the people, the ulama, the I mean, young men who are actually trying to be ulama are also like research scholars, as well as they are also modern educated. In that way, I think there is a change. However, like if you look specifically at the question, ulama masculinity doesn't exist in an authorized way, I don't think like you can completely agree with that argument. But still, earlier, I mean, even yesterday I was reading something where I found like people were not ready to, give their daughters hand in marriage to people who are considered to be ulama earlier. But I think, especially in the context in which we live, it has significantly has been changed significantly. That's what the observation that I have about, you know.
I thought you missed out on this Mujahid Jamaat axis altogether, because for this marriages, for example, officiating in marriages. Okay, among a vast section of the mujahids, anybody can officiate. It need not be even an ustad.
Yeah.
And I
But
believe that it is the same among Jamaat factions also. So
but
this
I'm
kind
not
of
talking about
centrality.
I'm not talking about ustadu per se. I'm talking about scholars. So they need to be like they need to know something to say about, right? At least some element of scholarship should be there with the people who officiate the marriage function as well, right? So
Not necessarily. Not of course they have to speak for about 5 minutes,
yeah.
but not necessarily. I don't think they have to spew words of wisdom technically. So this I think is thing. Of course, when you choose people to officiate, you choose somebody who has something to say. That's another thing. So I think
Uh,
this centrality of the ulama. That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a point in it, but still, I believe that there is, especially the marriages I attended, especially of the people from that background, like quote and I quote, the reformist. I don't know, like whether it's correct or not, because like it's a very contested term, but still, the people who officiate are either the leaders of these religion, I mean, organization or speak. That's how usually it is. Even like there are maybe like exceptional occasions where the father of the bride or the maybe bride or the bridegroom, like they deliver the speech. I don't know like whether, but it's even though it is there, it's exceptional. That's what you like the general understanding that I have about these marriage ceremonies and all that.
And even among even during the Friday prayers, Jumu'ah,
Yeah, yeah.
for mujahids, it need not be somebody who is professionally a scholar, so-called professional scholar. It can be anybody. Sometimes they'll call Arabic teachers of colleges who have some reputation of being, let us say, scholar in quotes.
Yeah.
So that's quite common.
I think the confusion we have here is like we are sort of considering the word ustad with scholar. These are like two different words, right? Like you need not to be an ustad or like someone looking like an ustad to be a scholar. That is obviously there, right? So an amount of scholarship, like an amount of accumulation of the capital that we call ilm should be there. I think like for anybody who is a khatib, like the one who delivers the Friday sermon, and I mean obviously like the amount of scholarship might be different, but still, uh, in order to authorize them to become a khatib, that's what I think like the little maybe I don't know like how much, but still at least a considerable amount of scholarship that is very much required for them, to deliver the sermons and so like equating maybe scholars with ustad. That's what I think like the confusion that we have now. These are two different categories altogether. It seems right.
And I had another thing in mind. I
Uh,
think the same kind of authority is wielded by somebody like Sunil P. Ladam, for example. Take him
okay.
as a good
Uh,
example.
uh,
See, and there are scholars like him. I'm again using the word scholar in quotes, like him, who are patronized by political groups. For example, the CPIM, for example, they cannot think of a party network, cultural network without Sunil P. Ladam. So similarly, so I think this is a common pattern. This kind of masculinity that is also an exercise of masculinity in one sense. So I had
yeah,
him in mind when you were
exactly.
talking about this ulama hegemony.
All right. Thank you for this observation.
Thank you, thank you.
Anybody else?
Hello,
Anybody
ma'am.
else? Yes.
Hello.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sir. Hi, sir. Sir, I'm a research scholar from Mangalore University. So
Uh-huh.
I was just wondering about the relationship of migration that you mentioned about the Gulf migration and the kind of masculinities that it produces in Kerala in terms of wealth and wealth accumulation, and how does it structure the kind of masculinities that we see today in Kerala. So now I think that we have passed the stage and we have reached kind of European migration to a larger extent, and how this changing pattern of migration from of people from Kerala, how does it largely structure the newer variants of masculinity in Kerala. Not especially in the context of Muslim masculinities, but as a whole. Because I'm saying this because the Gulf kind of masculinity or the Gulfen masculinity also impacted the middle class, the rise of the middle class in Kerala, also among the Hindu population also. So how would it impact the newer kind of migrating patterns? Would impact the structure of masculinities in Kerala as a whole? I just was wondering about this particular question.
Yeah, this is actually, I think, outside the thing that I have presented today. Anyway, like, if you look at people like Ocello and Rosella, like they have observed about this migration and the kind of change this migration brought about the social, status of people, especially from the non-hegemonic back. That's what actually I was interested in and I looked at, especially if you look at, the kind of masculinity that this Gulf migration produced, which is defined by their cash and consumption, right? That's what like the term that Osella used, and that actually sort of complicated the power relations among different people. That's what actually my observation. But like your question is actually beyond that, like the changes that especially what happens to the people. And nowadays if you look at especially among the millennial generation, we find these kinds of migration to Gulf countries, as well as nowadays to on a large scale in European as well as in Western countries. And again, like if you look at the younger generation, like on a large scale migration to outside Kerala, sort of a campus migration, I don't know what to call it, campus migration, I think, which actually produces a significant, makes a significant change among the way in which the masculinities are shaped among Mappila Muslims. And nowadays you will find people who, I know like many people like who are couples, like who are married, and both the boy and girl, like who are research scholars or who are who works together. And I know like men who take care of like what traditionally being considered as a feminine roles, like looking after kids or like household chores and all that. Means nowadays I think like very, even though slowly, or I don't know like the meter of the change, but we find like significant changes are taking place, especially, especially in the context of Mappila Muslims. So I think these migrations or the what is it called, the metro, or cosmopolis, that the increasingly cosmopolitan culture of Mappila Muslim, which actually has a very significant aspect, very significant influence upon the masculine formation, or the shaping of different masculinities in my mother. That's obviously good, but I cannot actually sort of give you an answer word categorize and give. And I haven't done a study like that. Would be hopefully my future project. Like once I'm settled with my I'm thinking, would like to hopping towards doing, exploring that particular question, the millennial generation, this migration, and the significant changes that is taking place among Mappila Muslims. Hopefully. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Anybody else? I think we should call it a day and conclude. Is there anyone who have more suggestions, doubts, or comments and criticism?
You're asking me?
No, for everyone.
Okay, Sharif sir. Okay.
Well, I'm
Okay.
sorry I took up some of your time. I didn't realize that you were very tired. So,
I'm very tired actually today, and unfortunately,
Sorry
I
about
couldn't time to connect my headphone with the computer. So, like, I'm trying it, but I could not do that. Sorry for that. It's a
Well, I'm sorry about taking up your time because I was just carried away by the discussion.
I'm
I'm
coming
sorry.
directly after my class, so I
Oh,
took
yeah.
3 classes, and this is
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
actually tired. So, but I could not like, somehow. Anyway, I'm so happy that it's very, like a good number of people, as well as very live interaction, and I'm very happy to see like Sharif sir. I have uh, um, seen his Facebook writing a lot. And thank you, Nasreen, and all the faculty members as well as research scholars who are attending this. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and looking forward to meeting you maybe next time. Thank you.
So thank you, Qasim. Thank you all. So let's. I think we should wind up. He's so tired. We would really like to continue the discussions with more discussions and comments, but the speaker himself says he's so tired. We will call him for another day for the discussion. Hopefully, we'll see him soon. Thank you, Qasim. Thank you for the presentation and the very energetic discussion. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming here.